Good afternoon. We're here at Guardtime's headquarters outside of Tallinn in Estonia. We're going to be talking about big data and what it means for the world's consumers and enterprises and governments who are looking to understand how big data might shape our world in the years to come. I'm James Blum. I'm the Executive Vice President for Guardtime Worldwide, running all field operations. And I'm joined by Jose Luis Agundez. And thank you for coming and visiting us today. Jose?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, James, and I'm more than happy to be here at Guardtime's headquarters, and as part of the Freedom Online Coalition conference, and happy to discuss a number of issues around big data analytics, data transparency, APIs, and a number of developments in this space, which is absolutely amazing. So, thank you very much.
So, Jose, we had quite a week.
Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts after attending the Freedom Online conference?
Yeah, it's been an amazing week. Being surrounded by, of course, the President of Estonia, driving the whole event, and having figures such as Vint Cerf and Michael Nelson, and figures from all across the board like Google, Facebook, and many really influential companies, and being part of the really engaging discussions around data privacy, human rights, data transparency, which is basically starting to be a debate, and I would like to go a bit more into that. So what happens when our data as more personal data that is being, of course, used by different companies, we trust those companies to actually use that data, for instance, telecommunications company. But those companies are heavily regulated. What happens with the non-regulated companies like the internet players? When they're coming clear on, one thing is coming clear with a dashboard on what data they hold from you, and a very different thing is what they do with the data once you give them consent to use it. So that is an interesting debate, and it's just starting. And I could see hints of an interesting debate to be driven by what happened this week here. So yeah, that's been a fun ride.
And what's particularly exciting for us at Guardtime, and having your unique perspective as a European Union participant in the market, as well as a Spanish executive, and having such a global company like Telefonica that operates all over the world. In these mobile-first markets and in these times where governance of data and protecting people's privacy and protecting the right to use the internet and to leverage the internet to build greater community and collaboration across Africa, across Latin America, and across Europe, and for all the new member states that are joining, wanting to take full advantage of the internet. What do you think that the world needs to really appreciate and understand, given your unique perspective on seeing both the evolving markets in non-regulated operators coming from North America, and then more regulated environments like Europe, and now the freedom and openness of mobile-first markets, and how we're going to basically onboard the next 3.5 to 4.5 billion people who've not had the opportunity that the rest of us in the West have had over the last decade? What did you see?
Well, first I see an amazing opportunity to tap into what is going to be an ocean of data that we generate as persons, of course, without even having into account the sensors data that is going to come with the M2M revolution, but just focusing on the personal data space and all these new billions of people that are going to be joining, and the ones that are already in a mature market, there's a fundamental challenge there, because it is not enough with the situation we have now, in which regulators, data protection regulators, are basically having a surveillance and a strong participation on how data coming from regulated industries is being used. I've been participating and I have sit down with the regulators in several of the countries in which Telefonica operates.
Yes.
And that's an amazing point of view, the one that they have, of course, because they are acting on behalf of the users. And I think that the situation needs to be in which all companies understand that they are acting on behalf of the users, instead of trying to, or needing to be in charge of that watchdog, of that regulator. And that the only way that can happen is being much more transparent in the way we use as companies, the data that the persons trust us with, and going forward on that, being very transparent on what we do afterwards, so that we can enable in the end a transparent data economy. Otherwise, if there's never that transparency, we as users could never be happy that and fully confident that what is going to be done with our data is what we expressly consent to. We can do something like, for instance, allow a company to give us coupons if we allow to provide our data for advertising purposes. But if the company is doing that monetization, that particular piece of monetization, are never clear on the use of that, and are never clear on what part of the profit chain that is around the data is coming back to them, that is always going to be stopped by fears, uncertainty, and doubts.
Yes.
About if that's the only use that is being done of my data.
And I think that you're raising a great point that I think it's exciting, having a background in shipping. Transparency, the greater, if you look at the history of trade and growth of all economies, the more the transparency was imparted in the supply chain, the greater the participants that got involved. We saw that with the evolution of shipping and the container, and now we're into the containerization of people's data and how that data is actually allowing multiple third parties to have that privilege and that opportunity to transparently interact with that data and have individuals empowered by their data. The other great revolution out there is obviously having consumers, the more access they have, the more economics are there. And so you touched on that. I'd love to get your next level of insight there on transparency of data driving new economies and new capabilities for people to have that monetization that consumers want and enterprises want and governments want to enable. And how do you see the phone, from the European perspective, and given that Telefonica is across Asia and across Latin America, you're really getting insights from 1 billion people out there. What do you see that most people from North America, most people from Asia specifically, have not appreciated that the European Union telecommunications and mobile operators have seen, given the scope and breadth of their operations around transparency and about monetizing big data?
I really see that there's a very peculiar environment within the EU that allows for some room to let's say interchange between the different countries. Let's say data centers. You can have an operation in which one country you operate in one country and you have your data centers in another country, and the EU regulation covers that. But when it comes to data protection,
yes,
it is a unique, and I think it is a good example of what can it be exported to the Americas or Asia in coming time, because of course we've been dealing. We are active as Telefonica in Germany, and we're active in Spain and the UK and other countries. And in all those countries, I think that we have the best examples of the most restrictive data protection regulation possible in the whole world.
And do you see what we heard from President Oves, given that Vinsurf was there and Facebook was there and Microsoft was there, and the sovereignty of data, the governance of data? He talked about how important integrity, which is not something that's been fully understood before. Why is integrity, from your perspective, so important? And can you give us some insight into what he was thinking and why that was such a fundamental and revolutionary and incredible insight that he shared at that dinner?
Yeah. I think that was an incredible moment in which, of course, a top policymaker is speaking in a way that can be, of course, exported to other policymakers, so nation states can understand that kind of language, because it's devoid of the technology noise that might be cluttering some of the understanding for some of the players in the industry. And in that case, I would focus on one of the things that he said, and it is that fundamental importance in keeping being very, very, very true that the integrity of the data that persons are putting forward is always preserved. So how do you actually realize that? It's an issue that needs to be solved.
Yes.
And but having the realization that that is the fundamental problem that is now facing the industry. And for instance, from the point of view of the work I've been doing for the last 2 years, having the necessary trust in the data provider side, which is of course having the delegation from the people to handle that data.
Yes.
So it is a chain of analysis. It is a chain of custody of the data.
And do we have that in place today? And if countries need to export that integrity, obviously he mentioned keyless signature infrastructure as being a key new platform for countries to be able to export data integrity to all the delegates that you were talking about. How is that something that you saw when you saw the reaction out there from everyone who attended the conferences this week, from all the 100 plus ICT ministers and 50 mobile carrier operators, and then all the NGOs that represent and are there to protect the freedoms for consumers worldwide? What did you see between that dynamic of the integrity of data and the transparency of user information, and bringing that together in a system where those three groups of people, governments, consumers, and enterprises, can leverage these revolutionary new platforms in big data? Are there big data governance platforms out there?
Well, what I could picture by the conversation and how things unfolded during these days is that Estonia was presenting a solution to a problem that some of the people in the room were still considering a problem without that solution.
Yes.
And that was an amazing realization, because you can see that, of course, with the stack of technology, but also the policies supporting those technologies to be used in the right places, like KSI, as you mentioned, we're able to enable a complete government to be based on an electronic signature and to provide the necessary trust that the data integrity is preserved, and that the people sitting in that room were basically amazed that that was possible in the first place. But it was not the same situation for Estonia. It was like, okay, this is today. This is something that we are now doing, and there were very interesting thoughts about virtual country.
Yeah, absolutely. Data embassies. Data embassies.
Anywhere in the world, but you're still an Estonian citizen, and you can sign your pharmacy receipts, and then you can sign your tax declaration
with that integrity and
with
transparency.
That integrity and transparency. That would be impossible. That would be, let's say, impossible. Could be that it is possible or feasible technically, but it would never have the necessary trust underneath. At some point, the change might be broken, or you could not audit what happened between the country you're now visiting.
That third-party verification.
All that is. It might be very easy to say, but it's so hard to realize that seeing it realized in this country.
To do is to see a state do that.
Yeah, it was an amazing realization. You could see in the faces of Facebook and Google and other players that it was something relatively new and interesting to them as well.
Well, as an American consumer who uses Google and uses Facebook and has been privileged to experience the great, incredible technology that Microsoft has brought to us, what was amazing to me as an American citizen and consumer is that for the first time, because the European Union has so many critical members, that appreciation of national sovereignty and yet membership for all those various parties to transparently be able to leverage a country like Estonia, who is basically what Peter Guerra from Booz Allen and other distinguished men like Sandy Pentland from MIT in his book Social Physics, these data lakes that North Americans as an American that we don't really truly appreciate, they actually really exist. And they exist within government platforms for regulators and our auditors, PwC and Ernst & Young and KPMG and Deloitte, these great firms that are helping all these fantastic companies kind of navigate these new compliance and challenges around cloud and subrogation and indemnification of data and the regulation around protecting the data and auditing the data. I mean, It seems that the EU is now, the member states and the best operators are now in the unique position, because they've been living with this world for so long, to actually bring together a solution and export that to the world that frankly does not exist in terms of experience in Asia or in North America. And as an American consumer, that was one of the insights I came away with. There's a natural, tremendous opportunity for Europe to lead the world. And as an executive at Telefonica, I mean, did you see that way, or is that just a Californian's perspective that one of the great challenges of working in Europe is you have to make everything local. Yeah. That localization, that need for transparency for consumers, could be this great moment for Europe. What do you think?
Oh no! It's within the fantastic opportunity on big data. This looks like another big opportunity to actually make a splash in the market, and it is just like you said. There has been such a big struggle for regulated companies to come up with a solution that allows both the growth in the sense of being able to monetize the data, and Telefonica is a leader in that space, and still be compliant and be coming forward to the users and consumers with a clear message that is completely separated from spy stories, NSA stories, and stuff like that. So
yeah.
This is about companies doing business, sitting down with the regulators, and being as transparent as possible.
Yes.
And being very absolutely convinced that this is the first step in a future of digital data trading and sharing, and that in this case Europe is in a perfect position to do that, because it is just like that. I mean, we've been witnessing the beginnings of it. Now there are technologies within the same European space that allow that to happen, not just to be a beautiful PowerPoint slide, but just like a reality that may allow the trading to happen.
Yeah.
And now it is a fantastic moment to be able to take that forward, to make it a reality, sitting down with the necessary players, the sectors and industries that we've been working with during the last 2 years, for instance, and being able to realize interesting scenarios which are also beneficial, to have a win-win proposition for the users and for the industries in the financial, insurance, advertising, any of the spaces that are adjacent to, for instance, to the ones that Telefonica has been exploring in retail and transport, with products such as smart steps.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been active there for
Telefonica has been absolutely a thought leader in the telematics side. And I guess this brings me to my biggest question, that maybe the NGOs could benefit tremendously from your unique perspective and Telefonica's, which is, they seem to be focused on how often can they get transparency reports. And I couldn't help but say to myself, but this new world of machine-to-machine and Internet of Things is one giant embedded sensor network. And we as consumers are part of that incredible process of network effects, which everybody wants to leverage and everyone wants to monetize everyone else's infrastructure and everyone else's data. And now humans are part of this incredible sophisticated network of sensor systems and wearable computing, but it's an ocean of data. And so how do you have compliant governance, audit, risk addressed? And I felt like I was in the 1970s and with the Soviet Union talking about data. We published our transparency report at the end of the third quarter, and we did the right thing. It sounded very 1950s and 60s to me.
You're very right. I mean, it felt like that. It felt like when the Telefonica took the step to come into a retail space, what we were facing was people that is still active and making money out of it, clicking to count people at the storefronts, and taking surveys on the streets.
Yeah.
When there's a sea of data, an ocean of data out there to, within the law, extract aggregated statistics out of the people actually hitting the streets, pacing the pavement, and then put those numbers in a way that are absolutely, people is absolutely happy with the results of those analytics. But then it's a result that is, it really takes those previous ways of reporting and controlling, in a sense, the traffic of people, the movement of people in the cities, and it's like it's a whole new space. And there's one thing there. There's no stopping that. So let's be clear. Let's go together with the regulator. Let's go together with let's work with the people, and let's have them understand that this is not a fundamental human rights problem. It is not like that. And
it's a scale problem.
It's a scale problem, and it is also a situation in which, of course, falling short, like having a report on neutrality. It's just like.
Well, what I enjoyed as an American is to watch the revolution here in Estonia.
Yes.
It's incredible to watch a country of less than 2 million people come up with an infrastructure that allows them to give every citizen full access, full transparency, full accountability to leverage all of their data and to know who's interacting with that data. And they, as part of the European Union has helped a state create a system for all of us around the world. There's going to be 10 billion people, and Estonia is the leader. They're the thought leader, and that's why all these countries were here. And you don't need to spend 100 million,
Oh yeah.
a $500 million, $1 billion in data center infrastructure, which is my background, to go and actually export these tools and this capability and these platforms for governance and compliance and audit and risk to protect the world's consumers. And it's here, and it's now, and they're exporting it.
It's an amazing.
And so what do? And Telefonica has been right there, you've been right there, and you're leading this charge. So what are some of the excuses that you heard during this week of why people can't move faster? Because obviously Telefonica is there, and obviously Estonia is there.
Yeah.
And the EU has this opportunity to lead the world. What do you think, the people who are listening to our conversation could really particularly benefit from, who are listening to those classic arguments? We don't have the internal IT staff. We don't have the time to go and find, is it Capgemini, who's a great firm, or our good friends at Accenture, who are fantastic, or IBM Global Services, or HP. These are world-class firms. Facebook leading the world with exposing their infrastructure so people can replicate it. I mean, fantastic revolution, but Estonia went the next step.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, the samples from Facebook and others are interesting, but a nation state, when people can actually order a pharmacy receipt and pick it up with complete clarity between the doctor and the patient, that doctor is allowing that patient to have that medicine at the pharmacy, there's no doubt that is absolutely more powerful than anything that we can do online, because it relates to our physical day-to-day life.
And this is not about confidentiality. I mean, that's what was surprising to me.
Yeah, no, it's about integrity. That is an amazing realization.
And so how do we get, basically the rest of the world to appreciate and understand this revolution that Estonia has embarked upon?
Well,
when you're looking at taking integrity systems as the key to this transparency and the sharing of data, and the scale and the volume, as you said, an ocean of data out there. What do you think that world-class operators like Telefonica can impart, in this new world of compliance and big data ethics and trading economies around big data? Is it what are companies out there? We've seen Mashery be acquired. We've seen Layer 7 be acquired. There's questions in the press. Will some of these companies who've been absorbed by Intel and Computer Associates, CA is not necessarily, nor is Intel, two companies that are on the first of everyone's lips of understanding and appreciating the mobile-first revolution, and tremendous leadership in both companies, tremendous leadership in Google and Facebook, but candidly, Facebook's bought their way to mobility in the last year, and Google is also working very closely to extend the value proposition of mobility across wearable computing with their acquisitions and giving people better transparency reports. But what is the next thing that you think that all these great firms need to do that they could really learn from a mobile operator like Telefonica and what you're doing with mobile first platforms?
I mean, all those companies that you mentioned really deserve a lot of respect for what they're doing and the strides they're taking in online and other sectors. But of course, there's nothing that can beat being there in the field playing the game, and that is the case of the telco industry.
Yeah.
Daily.
Because Americans seem to be focused on APIs. It's really not about the APIs.
Oh no, it is not about.
What is the big it's the big app versus in Europe, it seems, and the big platform versus the big API.
The thing is, when you're right there and you're sitting down with your regulator and you're talking about the technology and the anonymization of the data so that it can be processed and can be enabling this data monetization future and trading on the data with full transparency, the question very easily goes outside the technology, outside the APIs, outside basically the technology bits that will enable it, and very easily comes into the policies and the trust and integrity and the attribution to where the data is and the chain of custody
So
and
that
the
means
chain of
real
analysis.
time.
So,
That means real time.
yeah.
I mean,
It
how
needs
do we?
real time.
How,
No,
how,
it needs to be
right?
real time. Yeah. But the thing is,
But
if you-
transparency reports are not real time.
Oh no!
Do
That's,
you think that was lost
No,
upon the
no.
North Americans
That's-
that were present?
That reminded me of the retailer saying,
Where is my
"Hey, we're
real
living
time?"
with a 6 months,
Yeah.
6 months old report, or maybe the Institute of Statistics, which has data from last decade. I mean, you cannot really take any decisions
That's back.
on that.
That's back
So
testing.
you need to go real time, or you need to go to data from yesterday or last week, and then you are speaking about the present.
Mm.
And that is what we can enable with this. There was one thing that struck me, and it is if you need to solve a problem, and you mentioned a number of API companies, what problem would you solve? The technology, the management of the API, which is something that many companies have focused on, or would you address the trust, or in fact, you address the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that really is taken over the understanding of any other uses of the data? Because if you're fearing that the data is going to be misused, and if you're fearing that the data protection regulator is not going to be happy with what you're doing with the data, because you cannot prove, you cannot audit the whole path that the data
Supply
is
chain.
taken, the whole supply chain, the whole data analysis chain, and who are you trusting your data with, and that other entity being delegated or being part of the chain of custody of the data that is trusted to you as a service provider, then you are not addressing the fundamental problem, which is a trust, integrity, and attribution. So you need to name the names, you need to make sure that each of the entities is fully identified, and that all of the transactions with the data that is in origin protected and regulated is fully auditable along the way. And you need to address the fundamental trust problem, not just the technology
I mean,
bits.
Satya Nadella, I couldn't get over the insight from Estonia and Microsoft. Microsoft has been in Estonia for a long time. They made tremendous investments. They've acquired Skype. They've shown that leadership. They've promoted Satya, who comes from one of the world's most incredible mobile-first markets, from India. He's been, coming up through the ranks and showing incredible leadership. And Microsoft seems to understand Estonia's perspective on just sovereignty of data and governance of data and the physicality, this abstraction of data, and how people who are like their data. They're everywhere, and they're global, and they're mobile, and they're not at their desks, and now they're sharing their data with everyone. It's not just their friends and their local community. That data is crossing borders worldwide. So we need the next generation of platforms who can do that. And I guess, I mean, when you look at all the great firms from North America, what was clear to me is that this is a whole new world of governance and compliance. And what do you think that consumers want to see more of? Do you think they want to see more transparency? Or do they want to see more systems that they can leverage to actually put them in control of their data? Or is it more like it is in North America, where I'm really not interested in that, as long as I know that that I can continue going on with my daily business, and I'm okay as long as no one else is taking something that's private and confidential for me. I just want to go along my merry way. But the Estonian citizens have something American citizens don't.
Yeah. In fact, I can provide an answer that is related to my own experience when I've been talking to the public on these matters, and the benefits to the society of big data.
Yes.
Like in front of 100 people, there you get questions, and maybe you can try to understand on a percentage level how many of those questions were related to privacy, how many of them were related to what you can do with the data. I'd be happy to share if I know what they are doing. So I would say that clearly 80% of the people in a 100 people room would be worried about privacy. So they would be making questions around the NSA and so and so.
Sure.
So for that kind of people, I think that the data transparency type of debate and the solutions to that debate should be in place. So we need to come clear much more with than just a report, or much more than just a dashboard in which you show what data is being handled. But going forward with that, and then providing control to the user of, I want my data to be used in this context.
Yes.
Because I'm going to be getting a.
And how about sharing in the economics?
Yeah.
It seems that the Estonian citizens are sharing in the economics. They have a completely different relationship with government. I mean, we've seen in San Francisco incredible leadership from the lieutenant governor. I wrote a great book, Gavin Newsom, on how change citizen bill, totally changing that dynamic. And then you read Social Physics by Sandy Pentland, and you can see how if you can increase that communication and that dynamic experience with people, the way people interact with each other and their data, it's a whole new world.
Yeah. There's this other bunch of people that is happy with, once that they are clear on what the use is being made of the data, then they are happy to just like maybe have 2 or 3 notches of trust in which you say, okay, I'm happy to do it in this context, and then there are some others, as you said, no questions asked, do whatever you please with data, bring me some value, and that is the part that could be growing if trust and transparency is given to the rest of the population, growing from that core of people that are really happy about sharing as long as you get value, and then enabling this economy to happen, because otherwise it's going to be a struggle.
Trust is brands do incredibly well globally when they're trusted.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And they get that trust from transparency, and they get that when there's integrity in the system. And Estonia is exporting that. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And what do you think now when you see a lot of the great companies out there who are actually trying to package that up and bundle that up for corporations and for governments? I want to talk to you. I want to come back to this whole application API piece that continues to be at the center of the debate. We've got great companies out there like Apogee. We have great companies like Splunk. There are tremendous firms out there, but at the end of the day, neither Apogee or Splunk were here with 100 ICT ministers. And their presence in Africa is small. Their presence in the Chinese market is limited. Facebook and Google are not operating in these markets at scale. Now they're moving to Southeast Asia. But the governance and compliance and regulatory environment in India, across Southeast Asia, is really being modeled after the European Union. Yeah. So Telefonica is there.
Oh yeah. We've been working with Apogee extensively.
Yeah.
We're part of our Blue Via solution.
Yeah.
We were trying to expose SMS APIs, direct to bill APIs, so you could pay things with your telephone bill, things like that. Of course, those we have seen light and shadows in those areas. Yeah. In the end, you need to really guarantee. I mean, the lessons from that is that you really need to guarantee the trust. You really need to work on those fundamental problems before you can come with a solution which might be brilliant technology-wise.
Yeah.
But if you're not addressing the fundamental issues beyond that, and then you're not going down to the trust and integrity and the fundamental
in real time and at scale.
In real time and scale, then it doesn't really matter that you can have the best analytics engine in the world, because nobody's going to be touching the results of that analytics, because there's no way that people will trust either the operator owning as delegation data or the consumer in the end. No one in the chain is going to trust an API that is not trustable, that you cannot provide.
And then what do you think? I mean, here we've got great infrastructure as a service platforms. Let's talk about it. Amazon, we own your data. We organize data. We host data. Incredible innovation, amazing firm. But at the end of the day, it's a North American perspective. And Google coming into this space, we've got Google, we've got Microsoft. Once again, Microsoft seems to understand this. With Azure and platform as a service, the announcements in the last few weeks have been incredible, but Telefonica is moving above and beyond and faster. It's already been there.
Yeah.
So what do you think the American infrastructure as a service, shall we say, partners with governments, partners with consumers who are innovating in cloud computing can learn from some of the people in big data who've been in the mobile first world? When are these two worlds going to come together? Because it's clear to me that the big data platforms and the governance systems that people want to introduce seems fantastic, but they're really from private corporations, and they may not be, basically understanding this mobile first world coupled with the importance of the European Union perspective on data protection and data breach and helping consumers worldwide.
Yeah, no, you're
They're not integrated.
Yeah, no, they're not integrated. One of the things that Telefonica has been doing in that space is to have a cloud proposition, a cloud solution by the name of Instant Servers.
Yeah.
And we've been playing for a while that role within Europe and within the
Incredible innovation.
Yeah, the thing is that, of course, that is a space in which it's so crowded.
Yes.
And it's so much going on there with private and public and hybrid cloud and so on.
And isn't that private and public and hybrid data? Isn't that where we're?
Yeah, no. Well, that is the
That's where it's going.
point. I mean, you need, if you want to have a cloud play within the data, so then you need to guarantee that when the data goes to a cloud storage, or when the data is going to be processed in the cloud,
Yes.
all of the previous aspects on trust, integrity, and
I need to see that
need
if
to
I'm a
see
regulator.
that. And in the end, it is a question of being able to go down to the service level agreements
Yes.
that will be the basis.
And
of
have
all
that
this,
tied.
and have that tied to the processing of the data, and have that tied somehow to the transactions
Yes.
that are going to be built on top of the data.
And once
So
again,
that-
this is where
yeah.
Telefonica has been innovating in the browser because this is one of the key things.
Yeah. We've been trying to get some strides with Firefox OS, for instance, in what having a say in the devices market, so that we can somehow have transparency and clarity on the communications chain, so that we are not removed from the experience in the mobile devices that at this point is Apple or Google based.
Yeah, well, they seem to be focused on transparency reports and publishing paper, and Estonia is leading the world by going paperless,
Yeah,
and
amazing.
having full transparent systems and infrastructure that's portable. So I want to hit on this theme a little bit, the portability need that we heard about, from NGOs all the way to a lot of the states and the ICT ministers. That seemed to be something that was so important to them. But how do you do that portability if you don't have a global platform to rely on and a global mobile operator to deliver it? It seems like a perfect opportunity for the mobile operators who are in the European Union. What do you think about that?
Well, data portability is I mean, the example in Estonia is astonishing, really. If you want to provide your people the ability to sign using your mobile,
Yes.
any document that is a valid signature, as in a notary, in your country, then mobile networks are there to support that.
Yes.
And I can perfectly see the interplay of telecom operators, the government, and all trust elements in the middle. So that, for instance, the example of Estonia is perfect for that, because this bus structure, this X-Road
The X-Road platform, yeah.
the actual platform that is supporting the e-government in Estonia, it is an amazing piece of smart way to take this.
And that's an application platform as opposed to an API.
It's an application platform. It's a set of rules down on the technology level that can be brought up to the policy level, in which the different ministries
Yes.
collaborate, but then the industries, like the telco industry or the banking industry, can plug into that data channel,
Yeah.
and can, under the strong policies needed to have the rights to have the data for the purpose of providing communication services.
And now with Finland and the
Services.
agreement, we're
Yeah.
going to see this exported
Oh, that's
globally.
Amazing. That's an amazing development that Finland is adopting what has been done in Estonia, because
Yeah.
it means, and then on our conversation with the director of IT
Yeah.
in Estonia,
Yeah.
came very clear. It is no longer excuse for a government to say, "Oh no, I cannot integrate with that," because there are integration points, there are adapters very clearly described, that any legacy system can be adapted to work with the e-government solution that Estonia has been leading. So it will be a fantastic proof that this is not only possible at the smaller scale on a 2 million people country, can be exported and can be scaled
And
to any size
revolutionize.
needed.
Yeah.
And there's the opportunities there. I mean, we were discussing some
Yeah,
of the
nobody- I
data,
mean, nobody's
some of the
there.
the data plays that can be, I mean,
Yeah.
once that you put transparency in place,
Yes.
the initial setup that is now in Estonia can be made so much compelling by enabling the data trade. Once that you've got the functionality trade, let's say, I mean, one thing is being able to pay your tax because it's a function that you need.
Sure.
But then all this data trading future is able to be realized on top of such a platform.
Well, after going to the Estonian briefing yesterday, after the Freedom Online Commission, and to see all the benefits that Estonians have that I, as an American consumer, don't have not yet been afforded that great opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you see that these platforms are all going to merge? I mean, you have revolutionary social platforms. It seems the most revolutionary social platform in existence right now is Estonia's, based on what we saw.
Oh yeah, no, it's they seem to believe in the future, in fact.
Yeah, and if Facebook, which is one of the greatest social platforms out there, were to actually take advantage of some of the great innovation in social platforms that Estonia has built for its citizens and the Estonian consumers and the Baltic consumers and the Scandinavian consumers who are constantly coming through this part of Northern Europe, I mean, you've got access to pretty much beyond 400 million people within the EU. Because then again, where are they going? They're going to Asia. They're going to North America. So it seems to be. Did you see that same opportunity for everyone in North America as well as in China to take advantage of this great revolution happening in Northern Europe within the European Union, led by Estonia?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a question of the government in each of those countries being able to realize the benefits of having such a transparent and plug-and-play way of organizing the internal government governance. And it is
the physics of that data, like Sandy has talked about.
Yeah. And it's a question of realizing how much you will gain as a country by enabling that to happen, that if you are trying to stop that from happening, or just being lazy, let's say, and letting the legacy swallow your opportunity.
And isn't that the contract between governments and citizens? It's really the future of social platforms, and that's what Estonia has done. And then you have to have that mobile perspective, and Telefonica has always been the leader, and since the early '90s, it's been ahead of everyone. And to be involved in big data and helping retailers and countries with these regulation and compliance issues and monetizing and exposing mobile operator networks. What do you see for the future of exposing mobile network assets for developers and consumers and citizens who are in that social data platform that's being exported by Estonia and integrated into cloud platforms like instant servers and leveraging data off Facebook and Google? That seems what nobody seems to talk about is everybody's using everyone's platform. So how do we as a globe, as a society, as a person on the planet, leverage all the tools that are out there that every country is bringing to the table in this new world of privacy and transparency and data monetization? What do you think that we're going to see in the future?
There are two things there. I mean, there's an exploratory approach on the one side, and that is what we have trying to do. For instance, in Campus Party last year, in which we published data from the O2 network for 2 weeks in Christmas time, and we allowed in September that year, together with the City of London, for researchers to play with that data and to be able to bring up new use cases, new scenarios like crime detection, prevention of crime in the neighborhoods of London, or some other use cases. And that is one exploratory approach in which you are basically educating yourself and the public on the good use that can be made of the data. And then there's the platform approach, in which, of course, you need to be very conscious. I've been amazed by what I have seen this week here, that a country that have the possibility to reboot the whole administration of the ministries and the whole administration of the country, had an incredible opportunity to build from scratch everything, and now have a living proof, a nation state that is actually being able to operate every day, and that have already shown some incredible GDP savings by doing so. And that can be applied everywhere.
And this is the future of big data and trading and economics.
Yeah, we should couple those two things. That you have an operation platform that will allow data to flow much more easily, and is able to grow in the direction of incorporating what you learn when you explore data and society.
At scale and in real time.
So, and then you put those things together, and there's an amazing future there to be explored. And I would like Telefonica and myself to be part of it.
Well, we're very grateful for you coming to speak with us and to spend this week with us, and thank you so much for coming all this way. and sharing your insights on this beautiful afternoon in Estonia and in Tallinn.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.